The Alice Coleman legacy. Many of you will be aware of the second land utilisation survey that Alice Coleman did in the 1960s. Many of you will also be aware of the Dudley Stamp equivalent done in 1931, and you'll probably be, if you're aware of those two things, you'll probably be well aware that Dudley Stamp's material has all been published and available by the National Library of Scotland and stored at LSE for a long time, whereas Alice Coleman's stuff has not. Now, I have been working on historical census and boundaries for ONS 1921 through to 1991, and yeah, feel free to ask me later. And we have been needing small area maps for these censuses, but 1931, 51 and 61, not enough have survived. So I needed to have an alternative approach. So I came up with this CRBE, which basically is a representation of where people lived at the time of 31 and 51 and 61 censuses. And those are the two sources, the two land utilisation surveys. Now, Dudley Stamp did the first one, covered all of the UK, and it was, the data were mainly collected 31 to 33 or thereabouts, mainly by school children and volunteers. And the results of that survey actually did contribute to getting us through World War II. You can ask me about that later if you like. And he managed to get the whole set of maps at 1 to 63, 360, that's 1 inch I think, isn't it? But it took him something like 15 years to achieve this, and he had to actually finance it almost entirely himself. He second mortgaged his home, and then when that wasn't enough, he had mortgaged all his furniture. So all of those maps have been digitised. The published maps were digitised and published by the National Library of Scotland, of which more later. And this is the area around Gloucester. And what we required for our CRBE is the three classes here with the green boxes around them. And as you can tell, it would be a bit challenging to separate that one from that one. But we worked through methods to extract the urban footprint for 31 using machine learning. Not perfect. One of the major problems, you can see, is that roads are exactly the same colour as where people live. So that has been a significant challenge. Come 1961, Alice Coleman was inspired by Dudley Stamp, and she started her second land utilisation survey, in fact in 58, where she did a sort of a pre-study of the Isle of Thanet, and then extended it to East Kent. Dudley Stamp came along and said, "This is great, why didn't you take it nationwide? Oh, and by the way, while you're at it, why don't you do a vegetation survey, because we've never had one before." And that was a little unfortunate, because from my understanding, her energies were then divided in two directions, one being land use and another being land cover. Excuse me. So, like Dudley Stamp, she used a lot of school children, secondary schools mainly, some of them primary. And Dudley Stamp was actually quizzed, why on earth did you use school children? Surely the data that they supply is going to be next to useless. How can we use that? And his response was effectively that the primary school kids, particularly those ones in country areas where their dads actually worked in the fields, they were brilliant. They knew the land like the back of their hands. Get to secondary school, they've sort of got other things on their mind, and by the time they get to college or university, forget it. Useless. So the best data came from primary school kids, which is amazing. It would be rather different now, I suspect. Surveyors were sent out literally into the field and recorded on these 1 to 10560 or 6-inch OS maps what they found in terms of crops and industry and other activities, the land use. So this data was then generalised to produce published maps, and here's an example, area around Chepstow. So one of the things you notice is the urban footprint here. It's actually more extensive than is shown on the underlying Ordnance Survey map. And that's because this is actually contemporary with 1961 or thereabouts, when the survey was done. Whereas the underlying OS map might have last been surveyed and corrected 5, 10, 20 years beforehand. So that makes these, the second land utilisation survey mapping quite unique in that it's very much a sort of a snapshot of Britain, of England and Wales at least, and lowland Scotland, in a time of extraordinary change, very, very rapid change was going on at the time. When she retired from King's College, London, Alice Coleman actually bought the house next door, as you do, and turned it into a study centre, and she transferred from King's College, London, 13 rooms of material, which apparently was around about 10 tonnes of material, and set it up in this house next door as a study centre. So some of you might even have visited it. She lived in Dulwich, South London, and everything was, so you could actually make an appointment and go and look at these field maps, and then for a charge you could make some sort of copies of them. But come 2015, she found herself having to sell that house next door, at which point the 10 tonnes of stuff was split. 6 tonnes of it went to a warehouse in Kent, and 4 tonnes of it went into the house that she was already living in. I found out about this arrangement, and so I wrote to her and could I perhaps visit, knowing that she was well into her 90s. But then my letter arrived basically on the same day as Boris Johnson telling everybody to stay at home. So, COVID basically put the kibosh on that, and I wasn't able to see her. And 2023, unfortunately, she died. But her family found my letter and said, "Are you still interested?" I said, "Not half." So I went, and what did I find? This was an Aladdin's cave. So this is her garage, and the field maps are all in these ones here. But to get to them, I had to climb over this big pile here, and over here there was something like 60 cubic metres of shelving, which had all been made for her. They'd all been made for her by World War II veterans. It was absolutely amazing. The whole thing was just incredible. And the rest of the house was equally stuffed. 7,000 field maps, which were hand-coloured. I'll show you an example in a moment. And there was loads of different types of data. There was the urban extent, which I was after, but there was also vegetation, settlement data, and farmland, crops and stuff. So this stuff was not just for ONS. This was amazing. And this was a data set of very, very, vast proportions. So I went back to ONS and flagged it up and said, look, this is pretty significant, we need to rescue it. And thankfully the national statistician at the time agreed with me. This is an example of one of the field maps. So this is an old Ordnance Survey base map which has been taken into the field by the surveyor, who has then said, yeah, that's grass, that's wheat, this is an apple orchard with grass underneath. Across here we've got industry sort of category 13, that's kale, and so on and so forth. That extends of detail across the whole of England and Wales. I think you'll agree it's quite an amazing set of data. So how important are they? Well, it's a primary source. The data was captured across the whole of England and Wales, field, by individuals actually identifying what they saw. It was the last time that there was a national level land use survey before remote sensing. What then took over was the land cover map of Great Britain in 1990, but remote sensing. In terms of the CRBE, as I've termed it, for 61, it's pretty much perfect. None of it was published. And there are things like new motorways, like this is hand-drawn across an old OS map. New motorways, Glasgow Airport, drawn across the old field boundaries. And you can see things like, in other places, big new developments and dams and reservoirs, all those sort of things. And, excuse me, yes, I'll skip that bit. So the whole set was actually transferred down to us, and we went through, and Debbie Rhodes was here with me, and she was one of my colleagues who helped with the inventory, and we ended up with this big spreadsheet with enumerating all of the various classes of stuff. So there was not just the field maps. There were all these other spin-offs and the published maps. I showed you an example of one of them previously. Sorry, my voice is going. Thank you very much. Wildscape Atlas, Scapes and Fringes and a bunch of hectares and all the other stuff. Now, March, thank you so much. March last year, Alistair Edwards from DEFRA, who unfortunately had to cede his spot to me because of, we won't get into that. So that's Lucy Reading and, I don't remember his name, from Richard Pywell from UKCH. These three here actually worked with Alice Coleman in the 60s and were fundamentally important to actually producing what we found. And then there's Alistair and Jen and Olive, who are my two sort of level bosses. And so we worked together and created a consortium to rescue this stuff. Right. The published work maps, this is what they look like. They are pretty blooming amazing. The level of detail is extraordinary. There's something like 64 categories of data, she claims. And on the field maps, she claims there's 250 classes of data recorded. Up there, the yellow stuff is heath, moorland and roughland. And from very early on, this request by Dudley Stamp to collect the vegetation survey data started to loom large. And so they started in 60, and then in 61 they started including the vegetation data. The published maps, okay, on the left, that's a Dudley Stamp one, and on the right, that's an Alice Coleman one. And you can see very clearly that this is much superior. It's a larger scale. It's got vastly more categories of data as well. And what we now have is a facility for comparing 1931, 61, 91 and 2021 land use over that period. And Lucy Reading has written this paper, which is going to be published very shortly in the Land Ecology journal. Right, so back to here. So now, the previous one, there's only a tiny little bit of yellow. Maps like this, okay, this is up near Snowdon, almost entirely yellow. Vast amounts of data on it, but you just can't see it, can you? There's lots and lots of stuff. All of these here are little annotations of the various vegetation communities, but it's completely lost. And again, we're zooming right in on a small part of that. So Snowdon's up in the corner there. And again, sorry, but it's slightly out of focus as well. But you can't see what's going on, really. But on the original field maps, it's a lot clearer. So individuals, mainly Jeff Sinclair, actually walked all of these hills and surveyed the various vegetation communities. Unbelievable amount of work. They realised that they were losing all of this data, so they separated out the yellow land and created a wildscape atlas. But they didn't finish it because of popular printing problems and costs and stuff like that. We have actually scanned and georeferenced all of that stuff, and it's now available. Well, almost now. Scapes and Fringes was another one where this was also a spin-off where she divided the country into these classifications. There's townscape, the red, farmscape, wildscape, and the grey is urban fringe, and this is marginal fringe. There are things to be said about that, but not now. So there were the original, so although the thing was actually, Scapes and Fringes was printed at 1 to 400,000, excuse me, you lost a lot of data, but I found the full set of working sheets at 1 to 100,000. And so I then created the first GIS footprints of all of these data sets, the field published, Wildscape and Scapes and Fringes. And we have agreed with the family that all of this stuff is to be digitised and released under Creative Commons. So Land Use Research Unit is Alice's personal company thing. So yeah, all of those to be scanned, have been georeferenced, and have been through lots and lots of QA. And so we are on the very verge of actually publishing this stuff and releasing it publicly. For instance, quickly, there. Right, that's where we are. No, okay, I'll skip that. That was the field map of here. Here we are, great, okay. So these are the field maps here, and the red polygons are what the MSc student has actually managed to get his model to recognise. And those three are also all have particular challenges. Another one for anybody who wants to get involved in this, low-hanging fruit, this is industry. So I will just let that sink in a little bit. Thank you very much to DEFRA, and particularly for Alistair Edwards, who doesn't appear to be here. You're not, are you, Alistair? No, that's a shame. Because he was actually very fundamental to actually getting this processing done. Thank you very much, and sorry about the